Welcome back. We're learning Tractate Shabbos, page 33. It's the second chapter in Tractate Shabbos. The name of the chapter is Bameh Madlikin. So we ended off yesterday, the last part that we discussed yesterday was Rava. Rava said, explaining a verse in Amos 4a, Shimu hadovo hazeh pores habashon, hear this thing, you cows of the Bashan, Asher Baal Shomron, who dwells in the mountains of Samaria, Haishkuz Dalim, you who oppress the poor, who crush the needy, Amar Rava said, Kegoin Hone Noshe de Mechoiza. The Pasuk is referring to the people like these women of Mechoiza. The Ochlon Veloy of them, who eat but do not work. So, it's referring to, Rava makes an analogy to pampered women living in his own day, whose lifestyles are so extravagant that their husband resort to theft to support them. So, Uchsiv, Hikeis Yeschem V'shidofan V'yirokin, are stricken you with blast and with mildew, Harbes Ganeisechem V'chalmeichem, the multitude of your gardens and vineyards, V'seinechem V'zeisechem Yirchal Agozim, your fig trees and olive trees will be devoured by the Gozim. What is Gozim? So it says in Gozim is a type of locust. It says the pasuk appears in the same chapter as the passage just cited. Gozim is a type of locust. That which the Gozim has left, whatever the locust has consumed or is left over, the locust has eaten. So that which the locust has left over, the yolek has eaten. Which the yolek has left over, the chosil has eaten. There are different types of creatures that consumed in the plague, that consumed the crops. And he snatches on the right and is still hungry, and he eats on the left and still is not satiated. Each one then eats the flesh of his arm. The Brisa gives its homiletical interpretation of this verse, this pasuk. Do not read the words, the flesh of his arm, as they are written, Ela besar zroy, rather read as if they were written, the flesh of his progeny. It says the Brisa related to zroy or zaroy, his progeny. The verse is the last link in the Brisa's teaching, confirming that for the sin of robbery, people may suffer such overwhelming hunger that parents shall, God forbid, eat the flesh of their children. Instead of the Besar Zroy, the Besar Zarei. I'll take it Besar Zroy, Besar Zarei. So, that's for the sin of robbery. Now, the Brisa enumerates the consequences of some other transgressions. For the sins of delaying judgment, ve'ivut hadin. We're holding in 33a1, and the bottom, the left column. It says ba'avon inu hadin, for the sins of delaying judgment, ve'ivut hadin, and perverting judgment, ve'kilkul hadin, and corrupting judgment, uvitul Torah, and neglecting Torah study, cherev uvizarova, the sword, invasion, plundering, shall increase, plaguing the Jewish people with their presence. V'deva uvatzeres bo, and pestilence and famine shall come. In addition, people will eat but will not be satisfied. They will eat their bread by weight. What does that mean? It's going to be very expensive. In the state of famine that will prevail, women will pour their scant resources to bake. Women will pull their scant resources to bake bread in a single oven, but the loaves will crumble as they are baked, forcing the women to weigh the crumbs to divide them equally. So, each element of the described punishment emerges from the distinct phrase. With these two verses, the Vaishnava proceeds to list these phrases. I'll bring upon you a sword, avenging the vengeance of a covenant, and we know that the word covenant refers only to Torah. If not for my covenant day and night. When I break for you the staff of bread, 10 women will bake. Because they were revolted by my ordinances, by mitzvahs, my commandments, mishpotai, because they were revolted by my ordinances. For the sin of taking oath in vain, shvuas sheker, and false oath, v'chilu Hashem, for the sin of desecrating the name of God, v'chilu Shabbos, and desecrating the Shabbos, chayo ravo ve'emakolo b'nadam ismatim v'dochim shtemim. Population of savage beasts increases, and due to the attacks, cattle are disseminated, and the human population decreases. V'adrochim mishtoimemin, and the highways become deserted. If despite these you will not be chastened towards me, al tikra be'ele ela ba'olo, do not read through these as it is actually written, ela ba'olo, rather read it as if it were written on account of the oath. And how is it known which punishment await those who pronounce false oath? Uchsiv, for indeed the pasuk that immediately proceeds this, it is written, V'ishlachti v'chem eschas hasoda, I will incite the beast of the field against you, having shown the consequences besetting those who pronounce false oath. The Tana now demonstrate that the same ills also awaits those who desecrate the name of God and the Shabbos. Sheker, and in connection with false oath, it is written, you shall not swear falsely by my name, thereby desecrating the name of God. With regarding in connection with desecrating the name of God, it is likewise written, you shall not desecrate my holy name. In connection with desecrating the Shabbos, it is written, he who desecrates it shall be put to death. We see that the same word chilul, desecration, appears with reference to all these transgressions. We expound a comparison between the word chilul, written in connection with desecrating God's name, and the Shabbos, and chilul, written in connection with false oath. This leads us to conclude that the same punishment that applied to the latter category also applied to the former. Because of bloodshed, the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed. Shechina and God's presence departs from Israel. Shenema, you shall not bring guilt upon the land in which you are, for blood will bring guilt upon the land. And in the very next verse it is written, you should not contaminate, you shall not contaminate the land in which you dwell, in whose midst I rest. But if you do contaminate the land through murder, you will not continue to dwell in it. And I will not continue to rest in its midst. Is for the sin of forbidden sexual relations, and the cessation of the observance of the sabbatical Shemitah years and Jubilee years. Exile comes to the world. Exile, and then invaders exile the inhabitants of the land, and others come and settle in their place. For the inhabitants of the land committed all these abominations. The land became contaminated, and I recalled its iniquity upon it. As it is written, let not your land disgorge you for having contaminated it. And with respect to idolatry, it is written, cast your carcasses, and I will make your sanctuaries desolate, and you I will scatter among the nations. Regarding the sabbatical and Yevil, the Jubilee year, it's written, then the land will be appeased for its sabbaticals during all the years of its desolation. While you are in the land of your foes, then the land will rest and it will appease for its sabbaticals. And in the next verse it is likewise written, Kol Yemei Hoshamo Tishbois, all the years of its desolation it will rest. For the sin of speaking obscene language, calamities increase and harsh decrees originate against the Jews. God forbid. Young men of the enemies of Israel die, and orphans and widows cry out, but they are not answered. Therefore, over his youth Hashem will not rejoice. On his orphans, on his widows, you shall not have mercy. For all of them are hypocrites and evildoers. And every mouth speaks obscene language. Yet despite all this, his anger has not turned away, and his hand is still outstretched. He has more in his sleeves. What does it mean? And his hand is still stretched. Rav Chana bar Rava said, everyone knows why a bride enters the chuppah, to become married. She wants to get married. But anyone who perverts his speech and actually expresses this, that she comes to the chuppah for other reasons also. So if someone expresses that he speaks coarsely or explicitly about the intimate relationships into which the bride will enter, Even if the heavenly court had sealed a favorable decree of 70 years for him. He is set for 70 years, favorable decree. They will reverse it and put it and put in its place, God forbid, a decree for evil. That's if someone says explicitly why the bride entered the chuppah. If he says, look, they're getting married, they're building a home, it's nice, beautiful, but if you start speaking coarsely, like we said before, obscene language, it could, God forbid, turn a favorable decree of 70 years to a negative one. You see the importance of being careful with what you say and how you say it. Anyone who perverts his speech with obscene language, they are, Gehenna is deepened for him, making it deeper. Shenema, Sheicho Amuko Pizo is a deep pit, is for the mouth that speaks aberrantly, speaks aggressively, coarsely, and the like. Even one who listens to obscene speech and remains silent. The next part of the verse is stated, he that is abhorred by Hashem shall fall there. Anyone who purges his schedule of other duties so as to make time for sin, puts on his calendar, this time is for sinning, shall find welts and wounds breaking out upon his body. Shenema says 33:4. Injuries and wounds accompany one who purges himself for evil. He prepares time for evil. And this is not all. Rather, he is also punished with hidroikon. What is hidroikon? We learned before. It's a sickness. The prominent symptom is the swelling of the stomach. So, there are 3 types of hidroikon, this type of sickness. Hidroikon that comes of sin is characterized by skin that becomes thick. Hidroikon that comes of hunger is characterized by swelling. And hidroikon brought about by sorcery is characterized by a thin skin. Shmuel HaKotan was once afflicted with hidroikon. Amar Rabban Shalom, Mi Mephis, who will cast lots to determine the reason I contracted this affliction? People will assume that I am guilty of immorality. I Taseh, and after he proclaimed this prayer, he became cured. Abai Chashbe, it once happened that Abai was afflicted with it. Amar Rava, Yodanabe benachmoi the machpin nafshe. I know concerning Nachmani that he deprives himself of food. Let no one presume that he was afflicted with the hidroikon because of transgressions. Rava Chashbe. The Gemara relates that Rava himself once suffered from hidroikon. Rava Chashbe. Rava once afflicted with it. But Rava is the one who said, Nefishi ktili kedom and fiche kofan. More numerous are those who die by the pots than those whose stomachs are swelled through hunger. Rava was clearly aware of the practice that bring about hidroikon, and he certainly would have guarded himself from doing these things. Shani Rava, the answer to Rabban Beidim al-Koch. It says Rava was different. Why? For his obligations toward the rabbinical students who studied before him at set times kept him against his will from relieving himself regularly. So because of his tight schedule, he couldn't go to the bathroom regularly, and caused him to suffer from this stomach illness. Tanu Rabbon Rabbo Simonin Hein. There are 4 indicators of misconduct. Simon Laveo Droikon, an indicator of sexual transgression is a Droikon. Simon Lesinas Chinam Yerokon, indicator of gratuitous hatred, meaning that sinas chinam is like baseless hatred, is jaundice. Simon Agas Saruach Hanius, an indicator of arrogance is paucity, is being poor. It says paucity in Torah knowledge is ani. Who is a true knowledge is someone that is who is considered poor, someone who doesn't have any knowledge. Oshir Badas. You have Oshir Badas, a wealthy man that has knowledge, and you have Poor Badas that doesn't have any knowledge. Why doesn't the poor has knowledge? Because Gasus Aruach, because of arrogance. He knows everything, so there's nothing to learn. Therefore he stays poor with knowledge. He has no knowledge. He doesn't acquire any knowledge because he knows everything. So an indicator of arrogance is paucity. Simon Loshon Or Askero, an indicator of slanderous speech is the disease known as Askero. It's also Askero is identified with Shmuel. Look at 58. Askero is identified with diphtheria, a disease that primarily infects the throat. The days of the Talmud, it was feared as one of the most horrible of maladies, a disease that often leads to a ghastly death.
According to Rashi, the disease attacks the intestinal tract in its early stages. As it progresses, the throat becomes constricted and the patient can slowly strangle to death.
The sickness that attacks either the intestinal tract, or as we said before, the throat, ala meiser, because of not giving meiser for infractions of the meiser laws. Lezer, the son of Rabbi said, because of slanderous speech. Rabbi said, or some say was either it was Rav or Rabbi Yishmael ben Levi. My call. What is the meaning of the pasuk that the king shall rejoice in God? Isalel kol anish boy. Glorified will be everyone who swears truthfully by him. Ki socher pi yidei shoker. When the mouth of the liars will be stopped. The implication is socher. The implication is that the slanderous mouth shall be afflicted with askara. Rabbi Elazar son of Rabbi Yossi said that the askara comes on account of slanderous speech. Loshan Ora Kamar, Odima Af Loshan Ora Nami Kamar. Was he saying it comes only on account of slanderous speech, or perhaps he was saying it comes even on account of slanderous speech? When the sages left Yerushalayim and entered the vineyard in Yavne, when they established the academy at Yavne, Rabbi Shimon, 3 rabbis were already there. They asked this question, they posed in their presence, they posed the question in their presence, Makazu, this ailment of Askara and Pnei Mamad Ches. Why does it start with the innards of a person, the intestine, the intestive tract, and then it goes all the way to the throat, and conclude by afflicting his mouth? Nana Rabbi was the first of speakers in every place, and he answered, even though the kidneys advise, the heart discerns, and the tongue articulates the words, still the mouth concludes the process of speech. It is the mouth that bears the final punishment for slanderous speech. Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Yossi, said, because through the mouth, people eat non-kosher things. Would it really enter your mind that eating non-kosher things would lead to a punishment as harsh as asker? Or certainly not. That they, through the mouth, people eat things that are not properly tithed. That's what it means, that they're not properly tithed. They didn't give Maisa. So Rabbi Shimon said, no, the reason why people might be afflicted with asker is because of bitul Torah, of neglecting Torah study. So the mouth had failed to articulate words of Torah. Let the women who are afflicted with asker will prove you're wrong, because they're not obligated to learn Torah, and they're still afflicted with asker, so it shows it's for a different sin. The Gemara says, no, it's the same thing, but they might contract the ailment for causing their husbands to neglect their studies. You see, the husband studies, and they tell him, go do this, go do this, go do that, and by the time he's done, he's exhausted, he can't learn Torah. So they're causing him bittul Torah. The Gentiles will prove you wrong. They're not obligated to study Torah, and yet we see that they may be afflicted. So the Gemara says again, they could contract the illness for causing Jews to neglect Torah study. Young children will prove you wrong. They're too young to study. Why would they contract asker for causing their fathers to neglect their studies? And by school children but school children would prove Rabbi Shimon wrong, for they do study Torah, and yet they can become afflicted. In the case of school children, the reason they contract asker as Rabbi Gurion explained, the Omar, Rabbi Gurion, Veitim, Rabbi Shmaya, Bizman Tzadikim, but the time that there is righteous people in the generation, Tzadikim is possible that the righteous people are ensnared for the sins of the generation. Suffering befalls them, and through this the generation as a whole achieves atonement. After Ein Tzadikim Bader, however, there are no righteous people in that particular generation. School children are ensnared for the sins of the generation. Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Ziri said, and some say that Rabbi Shimon, the son of Nazira, was the one who said it. Ma'ikro, what is the pasuk? What is the verse that proves it? Pasuk in Song of Songs. If you know not where to graze, O fairest of women, follow the footsteps of the sheep. Then you can graze your kids among the dwelling of other shepherds. And concerning this pasuk, we say the implication is that the kids, the baby lambs, are collateral for the shepherds. So I mean, you graze your kids among the dwellings of other shepherds. So Mishkan Esayich is from the word mashkin, collateral. Young children can serve as a collateral for the shepherds, the scholars and leaders of the generation. Should the generation be bereft of scholars, if the generation doesn't have tzaddikim, then school children are the collateral and can be made to bear the brunt of the generation's iniquity. So the school children can take the position of the tzaddikim. Shmamina Aloshon Aronami Kema, he was saying that it comes even for slanderous speech. Shmamina, indeed, we learn from this that it is so. So Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai was Rosh HaMedabrim. He was Ramai Korel Rosh HaMedabrim Chomokim. Why did they call him the first of the speakers in every place? Yosef Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Shimon. There was three rabbis, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Shimon, sitting together. Yosef Yehuda ben Gerim Gabayo. Yehuda ben Gerim was sitting next to them. Another Yehuda. one is Rabbi Yehuda, and the second one is Yehuda ben Gerim. Posach Rabbi Yehuda ve'omar, Rabbi Yehuda said, Kama noim ma'asem shilum azah. How beautiful are how admirable are the deeds of this nation, the Romans who ruled Eretz Yisrael at the time. What was so admirable about what they did? Tiknu shvokim. They have established marketplaces. They have established bridges. Tiknu gshorim. Tiknu mechatzois. They established bathhouses. Rabbi Yossi shot. Rabbi Yossi, hearing Rabbi Yehuda praising the Roman occupation, so he was silent. Nana Rabbi Shimon Yochai, however, answered him and said, Kol ma shetiknu, everything they established, lo yitiknu al tzorech hatzon, they only established to serve their own needs. And he goes on, Tiknu shvokin lo yishuvim zaynes, they established marketplaces in order to quarter harlots therein. Mer chatzois lames hatzon, bathhouses in order to beautify their own bodies. Gishorim litam meches, they built bridges in order to collect tolls from those who traverse them. Yehuda ben Gerim went to the Romans and he snitched. He spoke about the conversation that he heard, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yossi. Eventually reports of the conversation were heard by the government authorities. So it went on. Yehuda ben Gerim said, and it went from one person to another person. Ultimately, the Roman government heard about it. Yehuda, who elevated the stature of the Romans, his ale should be elevated. Yossi was silent, didn't say anything. So we don't know. The Romans were not sure whether he meant that they are good or not. So they sent them to exile. Shimon who denigrated the Romans, who said what they really were, what he thought they were doing, Yehoreg, he shall be executed. Ozal who Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai and his son Rabbi Lozo went and they were hiding in the house of learning, in the study hall. Every day Rabbi Shimon's wife would bring them bread and a small pitcher of water, and they would eat the bread and water to sustain themselves. However, the decree intensified. The Romans escalated their hunt for the fugitives. Maybe they put higher price on the wanted. They were afraid. They said, Rabbi Shimon said to his son, the minds of women are easily swayed. Women's minds are light upon them, and therefore, perhaps the Romans will torture your mother, wife, and she will reveal our hiding place to them. So then they went and hid themselves in a cave. Miracle happened. Carob tree and a spring of water were created for them, and they drew their sustenance from these sources. They would shed their clothes and would sit covered in sand up to their necks, so they can learn Torah. So they covered themselves with dirt. All day long they would study together. And when the times for prayer arrived, they would dress, cover themselves, and pray. And they would return and shed their clothes, immersing themselves in sand once again, so that their clothes would not wear out from prolonged use. So they dwelled secluded in the cave for 12 years. Elijah the prophet came and stood at the mouth of the cave. Omar, Man loide leva Yechai de miskesa. Who will inform the son of Yechai that Caesar had died? The Romans are no longer searching for you. Uvatik de also the decree has been annulled. Novko, B'Shim Yochai and his son heard this, and they emerged from the cave. They left the cave. As they ventured back to civilization, they saw some people, the Kakove Vizori, were plowing a field and sowing crops there. They saw people working in the field. Omar, angered by this, Rabbi Shimon Yochai declared, why was he angry? Because he said, Manichim Chaya'ilam V'Iskim B'Chay Shor. These people are forsaking the pursuit of the life of the world to come and occupying themselves instead with the concerns of the transitory life. It's a transition. Why wasting time with the transition? So that was their outlook. That's how they saw people were occupied with agriculture, with sowing and planting. Thereafter, everywhere, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai and his son would cast their gaze, miyad nisof, the object of their vision would immediately be incinerated. Finally, a heavenly voice rang out and proclaimed to them, have you emerged from seclusion in order to destroy my world? Return to your cave. So the two went and returned to the cave. And dwelled another 12 months, a full year in all, for 13 months. For 13 years in total, extra 12 months they stayed. Omrei, at that point they said to themselves, Mishpat Usham Beginim Shnam Sachodesh, the sentence of evildoers in Gehenna endures for no more than 12 months. Perhaps our sentence has expired by now as well. Staying in Yotzus of Askol V'amro, heavenly voice then rang out and proclaimed, Tse'u mimaraschem, emerge from your cave. Nofku, so they emerged from the cave and again encountered people seeking their livelihood through ordinary means. They saw people working. Everywhere Rabbi Lozo, the son of Rabbi Shimon, would destroy something through his fiery gaze, Rabbi Shimon, his father, would heal it. The son would look at something, go up in flame, and the father would heal it right away. Amar Loi. So Rabbi Shimon, his father, Rabbi Shimon said to Rabbi Lozo, Beni, my son, Dai lo'ilom anivato. My son, the world has enough total devotees of Torah study in you and me alone. We need not hold others to our standards of devotion and diligence. So we are unique people, shouldn't be judging the people by your level or my level. Behade panyo demale Shabbat. At night, as night began to fall late Friday afternoon, Chozo Usav Rabbi Shimon and his son saw a certain old man, who was clutching 2 bundles of myrtles, and was running home with them, with the myrtles, as twilight descended. So they said to the old man, why do you need this? What is this for? He said, I need it in honor of Shabbos, to have a good smell in the house. That's why he ran with the myrtles. So why did you take two bundles? So he answered, Chad Zocher, Chad keneged Zocher, V'chad keneged Shomer. One is for Zocher and one is for Shomer. Hearing this, Rabbi Shimon said to his son, to Rabbi Lozo, Chazi kama chavivim mitzvahs al Yisrael. Look how cherished the mitzvahs are to the Jewish people. Each nuance of the law they celebrate separately, Yosef Da'atayu, and they were appeased. Shoma Pinchas ben Yair Chasone, Pinchas ben Yair, the son-in-law of Rabbi Shimon, heard that Rabbi Shimon had emerged from hiding, Venofak Lapa, and went out to greet him. He escorted him into the bathhouse. What do you do after being 13 years in the cave? First thing, you go to the bathhouse. So he escorted him into the bathhouse. He was massaging his flesh. When he saw that there was cracks in Rabbi Shimon's skin, seeing these painful vestiges of years spent in the abrasive sand, Rabbi Pinchas began to cry. And as tears trickled from his eyes, they fell upon the cracks in Rabbi Shimon's skin. And tears are salty. And trickled from his eyes, they fell upon the cracks of Rabbi Shimon's skin and caused him to cry out in pain. Thereupon Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair said to his father-in-law, woe unto me for having seen you like this. Omar loi, Rabbi Shimon replied to him on the contrary, Ashrecho sherisani b'chach. Fortunate are you for having seen me like this. Shilmole loi risani b'chach. For had you not seen me in such a state, bearing the marks of physical agony, loy motzosa vichach, you would not have found within me such the great insights in Torah that I now possesses. So really, Rabbi Shimon is referring to the greatness of his learning, the fact that he was able to accomplish teaching of the Zohar and the depth of his learning. He attributed all this success to his to his physical agony, to being in the cave for 13 years. The Mikor, and now we can see the superiority of his learning. The Mikor, the beginning, before he underwent years of seclusion in the cave, when Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai would pose a question, Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair would respond to him with 12 possible solutions to the problem. But in the end, after Rabbi Shimon in the cave, Rabbi Shimon spending years in the cave, when Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair would pose a question, Rabbi Shimon Yochai would respond to him with 24 possible answers, possible solutions. So Rabbi Shimon's acumen in Torah increased dramatically during the years he spent in the cave. Since a miracle was performed to rescue me, I shall go and remedy something to benefit the community. The community has to benefit from me now being free, since miracle happened to me. So dichtiv, for indeed the Torah relates that Yaakov was saved from the harm at the hand of Esav. The verse states, Vayova Yaakov Sholem. Yaakov arrived intact. V'omarav, what does it mean that he came intact? That miraculously he arrived intact in all respects. Sholem begufa, Sholem umona, Sholem sarosei. Intact in terms of his body, intact in terms of his wealth, and intact in terms of his Torah knowledge. So he was not harmed by Esav, even and money-wise. Even though he gave a large gift to Esav, all the animals that he gave to Esav were replenished. So there was no any kind of deficiency in his financials. And Sholem b'Teirosa, and intact in terms of his Torah knowledge, even though he spent many years in Lavan's house and living in a place of immorality, his Torah was remained intact. He was able to continue his learning, So it says, Vayichanas Pnei, and immediately after this, the same verse states, and he encamped before the city. Amarav, Matbea Tikinlam, our forefather Yaakov established a new coin for the city. So Yaakov made the coins, the money. He's the one that established it. It says, 42, coin would often bear an imprint distinct to that particular city, such as its seal. Pnei Ha'ir, the words Pnei Ha'ir, face of the city, hint at the notion that the way Yaakov acted graciously to the city was by minting a new coin. The creation of the new currency was of substantial benefit to the city, for previously the people had used the coins of other kingdoms. Now that the city had its own coins, its political stature and prestige was increased. That's the interpretation of Ben Yehoyada. So Amarav Tikelem Matbea. So Yaakov established a new coin for them, for the city. Shmuel Omar Shvokim Tikelem. He established marketplaces for them. Rabbi Yochanan Omar Mechatzois Tikelem. He established bathhouses for them. So we find that Yaakov expressed his thanks for a miracle by establishing some sort of municipal benefit to the community, and it was this precedent that Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai wanted to follow the same thing that it was done by Yaakov Avinu, by the patriarch Yaakov. Omar Ikar Milta Devoile Sakune. Is there something here that needs improvement? He right away wants to do something for the community. So what is it? What needs improvement? Amrulei, they replied to him, Ika duchla deit b'sfek tuma. There is a certain place in the vicinity that has a questionable status in regard to tuma, which means they weren't sure if any graves were there. And it is difficult for the Kohanim to circumvent the area. There's graves. They're not sure if there's graves or not. So the Kohanim, the priest, are not allowed to be exposed to impurity. So they constantly were going around the city. They didn't want to go straight. They had to go in circles. It made it difficult for them. That's something that needed improvement. Omar Ika Inish Dioda. Is there perhaps someone who knows that a presumption of tahara, of purity, had been established here at one time? Omar Le'ahu Sava, a certain elderly person, replied to him, Kan Kitzitz ben Zakai Tumas. I remember that here in this very place, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai used to cut lupines of teruma. At that time, it was evidently considered a tohar area. So thus informed Rabbi Shimon Yochai, Rabbi Shimon Yochai went about his task. Rabbi Shimon also did the same. It traversed the entire area, traveled in the entire area, and everywhere that the ground was hard, Tari, he pronounced the Torah. Or Rafi Tzaine. And wherever that the ground was soft, so somebody is probably dug in there, Tzaine, he marked off as Tomei. So the hard soil was pure, the soft soil was impure. So the Kohanim were now able to travel through the area, for they now simply avoided the location marked as Tomei. Rabbi Shimon did, however, encounter some criticism of his efforts. People say, how do you know that maybe under hard soil there's also dead people? Or maybe where there is soft soil, it's soft not because somebody was buried there, because other reasons. So there was criticism on his decision that this area is pure, this area is not pure. So Omar Osava, afterwards, that same elderly person who informed Rabbi Shimon of the prior status of the area said, I guess, sardonically. I guess it's disparaging. Sardonically. Tiel ben Yochai beis hakavois. It says, jokingly, he said about him that Bar Yochai, or Ben Yochai, the son of Yochai, has made a cemetery toher, meaning I'm sure there are graves around, but Ben Yochai made the cemetery toher. Omar Lei, Rabbi Shimon Yochai replied to him, Ilmol Eloi Seimonu, had you not been with us when we set about our task, or even had you been with us, but had not been counted among us as one of those who agreed to this course of action, then what you're saying would have been fine. But now that you are with us, and you were counted among us, what you have said has terrible consequences. Hearing their words, people will say, even harlots braid one another's hair. Should Torah scholars not certainly be as respectful to one another? You're not being respectful. He was not being respectful to Rabbi Shimon Yochai. First of all, he calls him Ben Yochai. Second, he says to him that you purified the cemetery, questioning his entire act of purifying the city of Tveria. So he said to him, Torah scholars are supposed to help each other, to be respectful to each other. Even harlots, they braid one another's hair. So Rabbi Shimon then set his eyes upon him, and he perished, he died. V'noch nafshi. Publicly disparaging a Torah scholar is seen as a grave crime, deserving even, God forbid, death. So Nofak Leshuka, Rabbi Shimon then went to the marketplace, Chazir Yehuda ben Gerim. He saw the snitch, he saw the one that sent him to exile, because Yehuda ben Gerim was the one that listened to the conversation and then went to say that Rabbi Shimon was speaking disparagingly about the Romans. So now he is faced with Yehuda ben Gerim, not Rabbi Yehuda ben Gerim. He saw the person whose words brought about the decree that had originally threatened Rabbi Shimon's life. Omar Adain yesh lezeh ba'olam. This guy is still around. He set his eyes upon him, v'asau gal shel atzomis, and turned them into a heap of bones. And we'll conclude with this. God willing, we'll continue tomorrow. Have a wonderful day. Should all be blessed. Should be married to see Mashiach speedily in our days. We'll have another short video on the laws of Pesach. So stick with us. See you soon.